Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint Monster Podcast presented by Spendthrift Farm, home of six-time reigning champion sire Into Mischief. Vanessa, it's been too long, but the time away will end soon.
I love it. I love it. And you know what? Absence makes the heart grow stronger, because I haven't been back in America since Del Mar last year. And of course, now any regulars to you and the show will know that they know the drill here. Vanessa's incoming, all things Breeders' Cup. And I'm actually so pumped. Honestly, the Breeders' Cup, like, I know we're not here to talk about it, but the races this year, I just feel like across the board are a higher level than, I don't know, I feel like they have been previously in some areas anyway. And we're obviously going to talk about the juvenile sprinters, and yeah, rev for it.
Well, we'll get a lot more of your opinions about the other horses from your side of the world that are coming over. But for now, you're right, here to talk about the Juvenile Turf Sprint. And I think we have to start talking about True Love, who won the Chevrolet Park, who led to my biggest, that race led to my biggest love last year in Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria decided to go longer. This one's going to go shorter. How good is True Love?
That is the big angle, though. You have hit the nail on the head there, because, yeah, True Love is definitely the big one in here for Aidan O'Brien. Obviously, he's going to have another runner as well, or it looks that way, in Brussels, and potentially as well, you've got Mission Central too. But at the moment, True Love's the big one. And obviously bringing in the Cheveley Park form, a filly, stepping down to the 5 furlongs. It's a different angle. It's punchy of Aidan. It's punchy with True Love, like it's punchy campaigning. And it tells us a couple of things, in my opinion. It tells us, one, that he really wants to win this race. And it tells us, two, that he thinks she is fast enough, which is the big question punters will have on their lips. Reading her form, she brings in the best European form lines. But the question everyone will be asking is she capable of running up to the numbers she's shown over further, down over 5, specifically at Del Mar? That's the big question, and that is the question I, at this stage, do not actually have the answer to, unfortunately.
Is she, just tell us a little bit, over here we can cheat with pace figures and things like that. Tell us, is she a forward type? Is she going to come from out of it? Is she going to get ran off her feet and have to try to pick up pieces late? What would you project her style would be in the race?
I think she'll be forward. I think she'll be prominent enough. I think they're going to ride her like she's speedy enough for the 5, as in they're not, if they're running her here, they are confident that the 5 furlongs is going to suit her. That, like I say, is a question mark for me. But the fact they're confident, I think they'll ride her confidently. I think they'll have her forward and in a prominent position. And look, like, she, as I mentioned, she brings in some of the best form lines in Europe for the juveniles, and she's a cut above, and she showed that last time. But the speed, the question mark, it is a question mark for her. But I think they'll be confident and they'll ride her forward, to answer your question. But it ties in nicely, if I can just move on to Havana Anna, because of course finished behind her in the Cheveley Park. But Havana Anna, trained by Donna O'Brien, good record over at the Breeders' Cup, good trainer specifically with the juveniles, speedy types as well, ticks all the right boxes. And yes, she was beaten by True Love, but that crucially was over the 6 furlongs. I think that when you look back at some of Havana Anna's Irish form over the 5 furlongs from the summer, she actually has the better toolkit for the 5 furlongs at Del Mar. And if you were to make me have a bet right now in this race, we'll rattle through a couple of the others. But for me personally, I think that Havana Anna is the most compatible horse we have coming over from Europe for this race and the challenges of the 5 furlongs at Del Mar.
So long story short, you'd rather own True Love, but you'd rather own Havana Anna for this spot based on the distance and her style.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Essentially, as a long-term prospect, of course, True Love's going to tick all the boxes. I think it's fascinating campaigning. I think it's punchy. I love to see it from Aidan, but I'm nervous for her. I am. Whereas the 5 furlongs and Havana Anna and the speed she's shown, some of her numbers as well, she's ticking more of the right boxes for me out of the Europeans. And that's just straight in there with basically the end answer, essentially. But we've got a few more to cover.
Yeah, and feel free to skip over the ones that don't get you excited. But Aspect Island, Mission Central, Brussels, who you touched on quickly. Any of those, if it's not the top 2, do any of those have a chance?
Well, look, I mean, fundamentally, the Europeans have this race worked out, right? I'm sorry to say it to a US racing audience, but we do. We've won it the last 3 years, and in fact, we've had a 1-2 in it the last 3 years as well. We've really got it sewn up. And you look at kind of winners such as Magnum Force and Mischief Magic, and they actually immediately kind of point in the direction of Military Code, obviously running in the same colours and for the same team as Mischief Magic, Team Godolphin, of course. But also the Magnum Force route is that like speedy 5 furlong route, and that is what Military Code brings into the race. Essentially, that's that like 5 furlong speed route. But Military Code like can't currently stack up against the best of the Europeans we're sending over here, and I'm not sure he's really got the tools for the challenge, really. I'd be nervous for him, even though I'm sure lots of punters will latch on to him because, of course, he's been running over the 5 and because of who he's trained by. And then you look at another race that's the sort of form is bringing in the Cornwallis. So that's the race that had Brussels and Aspect Island in it. But I suppose in many ways, actually, JK, the Cornwallis is one of Britain's closest races to this race, in the sense that it's a group race for juveniles over the 5 furlongs, and the second and third from the Cornwallis are coming over. But they would have to step forward, in my opinion. I think Brussels looks as though, I mean, some people are questioning his want to win. Just going to throw that out there. A little bit of a question mark about that for Brussels. And as for Aspect Island, to be honest with you, is that coming over as a bit of a travelling companion for Wimbledon Hawkeye for the James Owen yard? That would be a question mark there. So to summarise, they'd be a no, and that Cornwallis form is a no. Military Code is also a no. And then we should also just touch upon the other Aidan O'Brien runner in I keep calling it Military Central. It's Mission Central. Mission Central won on Champions Day over here, the new 2-year-old race for the Aidan O'Brien team. But that was over the 6 furlongs. Again, very different test. Quite a recent test as well. If they were to bring him over, I'd have concerns about him dropping to the 5. So when you go through all the Europeans, for me, you can write a good few of them off the list, as I have done there. And then you come down to True Love and Havana Anna and that Cheveley Park form. And Havana Anna would be the one that I think is best placed on what we've seen so far for the challengers of 5 furlongs at Delmar.
Zandon's poetry in motion. Big horse, but light on his feet. And he's always showed up and been consistent and been right there with some of the top horses in training. In the Bluegrass Stakes, he showed his determination and his raw ability.
It's over! Zandon wins the Toyota Bluegrass!
I feel breeders will be really blown away by what a striking, outstanding-looking horse he is.
Acacia, I feel like I haven't seen you in such a long time.
I know, it's been forever. You're all over the place. I'm all over the place. So hopefully we will get to reunite soon.
Yes, probably at the Breeders' Cup. Speaking of the Breeders' Cup, let's talk about this juvenile turf sprint. I don't know how we're going to edit this. We either had Vanessa Ryle or we're going to have Vanessa Ryle. So whichever one it is, to talk about some of the European contingent. Let's focus on the North American horses, but I guess even more close to home for you. Let's start with Intricate Spirit. What are your feelings and thoughts about Intricate Spirit going into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint?
He's exciting. He's done very little wrong in his career. He's 2 for 3. He just missed at Kentucky Downs, and the horse that beat him would come back and win a stake the following week at Kentucky Downs too. And then winning the Futurity last time, I think, was a really big deal for him because he has a lot of natural speed. He's a really high energy horse to be around in the mornings, and he was able to kind of take back a bit, settle, and come and catch that pace setter that day. So I thought it was a really big deal to show a little bit more of a dimension. I think the 5/8, given how quick he is not going to be a problem for him, and he's training with a lot of enthusiasm coming into it. So very excited.
That is exciting. Yeah. Miguel's first Breeders' Cup with Miguel in charge. So that's exciting for you and the family. Let's talk a little bit about these other U.S. runners. We know your heart will be with Intricate Spirit. Cy-Fair, one that we were able to see up at Saratoga for George Weaver, who's been basically 100 for 126 in turf sprints over the last couple of years, it feels like. What were your impressions of Cy-Fair's performance at Saratoga and then subsequently the performance up in Canada?
I thought she was really impressive first time out. The fact that she just missed in the Bolton Landing, I actually caught up with George Weaver the other day in Saratoga, and he said it was actually disappointing that she didn't win that day. But then they took her up to Woodbine, and she did face the boys in the Algonquin, and I thought she was very impressive. Same thing, she's shown a little bit more of a dimension because she was kind of in that first flight in her first couple of starts, and then last time in the Algonquin, going 5 furlongs against males, kind of similar conditions of what she's going to have to do in the Breeders' Cup, she was able to make a closing kick, and I thought she was impressive. She's very good. Like I said, clearly she's shown taking on the boys, no problem at all. And speaking to George, he said, they don't have a female equivalent of this race. It's kind of the same with the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. You see a lot more crossover with the fillies and mares going against the boys in those sprint races just because you don't have as much opportunity. So he said it's not something he's concerned about with her. I think she's super talented. He also sends out Royal Testament, who's a filly as well, but I think he seemed really high on Sci-Fair, and I think rightfully so because, like I said, she showed another dimension last time.
Okay, so you spent a lot of time looking at horse flesh, you and Maggie, throughout the summer and throughout the whole year. Is that a concern of yours, the physicality of a 2-year-old filly versus a 2-year-old colt at this point of their lives and their careers, or is it just kind of an interesting talking point?
At this stage, not so much. We talk about it a lot with 2-year-old fillies that debut maybe against the boys early in the season. You see Wesley Ward in particular do it a lot because often the 2-year-old fillies mature earlier physically and mentally, unlike humans sometimes, but at this stage, not so much. There's still so much development that's happening for all of them. You may see a difference. To be honest, looking at George Weaver's two, Royal Testament is more of a narrow kind of slider type of frame. She will stand out as the filly against the boys. Sci-Fair is like a tank, so I don't think you're actually going to even notice it, to be honest.
And then Schwarzenegger. I'm not sure if you were able to see him in the paddock, but is he well named?
He is. He's a big boy. I wasn't in the paddock for his first race, but I actually watched. I was on the early show, I think, that day, and I watched later half in the stands and watching that race. But it's funny because he was so hyped because I had interviewed Wesley early in the meet, and I said, we always look forward to your 2-year-olds. Can you give us some insight on maybe some that you're looking forward to? And the only horse he mentioned was Schwarzenegger. He's like, I can't wait to run him. He's so exciting. And then he scratched 3 times, I think, a couple times off turf. And then once was entered in stake, and he was entered at Monmouth, and then finally coming up. So it felt like he was kind of this elusive horse. And yeah, he got beat first time out. I do think that Atfield, who beat him, is pretty talented. He came back to win the Indian Summer. I think he's got some quirks that he has to work out. Maybe there's kind of raw talent there. He certainly could step forward. For me, he's going to have to figure out some of those things going into a race like the Breeders' Cup.
Well, I would imagine that you and Miguel probably look a little harder at the races you're involved in. Who at the dinner table have you guys talked about being a concern? If we haven't already named the horse, maybe an American or obviously a European that you guys think is the one you got to beat?
I think that there's always the questions with the Europeans. Aidan O'Brien potentially sending a couple who look pretty strong. I think, if anything, you do have a better opportunity to beat the European turf horses in a sprint race and 2-year-olds than you do in a race like the Breeders' Cup Turf. So, you've got Mission Central, who's already been in really good form for Aidan O'Brien, Charlie Appleby sending over potentially Military Code, Havana Anna for Donica O'Brien. These horses look like they have a bit more experience already, and that's always a question. But like I said, I feel like 2-year-olds and turf sprinters is your best chance to best the heroes. So this is the opportunity that you just have to take.
This is the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Monster Podcast presented by Spendthrift Farm, home of Breeders' Cup Classic winner Vino Rosso, the sire of Grade 1 winner Bottle of Rouge. PTF and David Aragona from Daily Racing Form back with you on the In the Money Media YouTube channel here today to talk about the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, a race which I am fascinated to see how it plays out on paper. David, we talked about the Juvenile in another video having potentially the shortest priced winner of the 2 days of the Breeders' Cup. I have nothing against those at the top of the market here. I think they're interesting, but given the kinds of figures we've seen these horses run, wouldn't surprise me if you had one of the bigger prices potentially winning a race like the Juvenile Fillies. I would love to hear your overview of the ones you think are going to be leading the betting as we start off.
Yeah, this Juvenile Fillies is definitely a more wide open race than the male counterpart, where it feels like two horses that by far run the fastest speed figures and look like squarely the ones that beat that are going to attract a lot of support. In this race, as you said, from a speed figure standpoint, a lot of the top players haven't really separated themselves from those that could be bigger prices. So this could be a race where you get a little bit of chaos. From a betting standpoint, I'm working on my early morning line for this race, and the top two choices that I've got right now are Explora at 3-1 as of 2 weeks before they draw the race, and Tommy Joe is the second choice at 4-1, but they're not exactly dominant when you look at the recent performance. I know they're both coming off victories in major prep races around 2 turns, but it wouldn't be a surprise if somebody else stepped up in this race.
Let's talk a little bit more about those two before we pull in maybe something at a bit more of a price that might be of interest. Tommy Joe, for our friends over at Spendthrift, right? It wasn't exactly the manner of victory I was necessarily expecting the last day. Still a serious contender. Feels about right to me at the kind of price you were mentioning internationally right now. Very, very similar type of numbers. How do you assess her chances overall?
I mean, she was the one that was talked about this summer on the East Coast after 2 impressive victories at Saratoga. She looked really good on debut, beat a decent field in the Spinaway very convincingly. But sometimes these horses that are really good during the summertime, they don't continue developing into the fall when the distances get longer. And kind of felt like that might have been the case with Tommy Joe and the Alcibiades. Now, you could debate what would have happened if there hadn't been a bumping incident in mid-stretch, because Percy's Bar, who was leading that field into the lane, definitely slammed Tommy Joe at about the 8th pole, which stopped her momentum. Not sure that she was really going to go by that foe, but the margin would have been closer between those two. But still, the fact that Tommy Joe was having to work that hard to even get by Percy's Bar, considering that she was 2-5 in the betting for that race, it's a little disappointing. And you look at pedigree, I mean, she's by into mischief. They can go longer, but on the damn side, her damn mother was more of a 1-turn, 7 furlong to a 1-turn mile type of horse. So I'm not sure that longer distances are going to be her forte moving forward. But in a race like this, where nobody has really stepped forward from a speed figure standpoint, she's a contender. It's just a matter of how short a price you'd want to take.
Let's talk about Explora as the alternative. You've got them ranked similarly in terms of how you think the public is going to react. This one going out for Bob Baffert, coming off that big win in the Oakleaf. How much better do you think she needs to get to win a race like the Juvenile Fillies?
I mean, she's definitely going to have to beat a better field than she did in the Oakleaf, because the prep races for this Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies have not necessarily been stacked with talent. So this is going to be the toughest test that all these fillies are going to be facing. I guess the big advantage that she has is that she doesn't have to ship for this race. She's based out on the West Coast, whereas a lot of her main rivals will be coming in for this Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. I liked the progression that she showed mentally in the Oakleaf, where Bob Baffert took the blinkers off from her first couple of starts, and she seemed way more relaxed in the early stages. He was content to rate outside of a stablemate in the early stages of that race, took over and won pretty convincingly in the end. She's a horse that definitely has pedigree to handle longer distances, being by blame out of a Bernardini mare, and she showed no problem getting it. She was obviously a speed crazy 2-year-old over the summer, but it's nice to see them kind of transform themselves as the distances get longer into the fall, and it feels like she did that. So I'll be interested to see how much speed is in the race, because I don't think she's one that wants to be that far off the pace, but to me, based on what she's done, she does feel like the horse to beat.
They're off in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Vino Rosso has taken the lead, and it's a vintage performance by Vino Rosso.
Bottle of Rouge from her own stable is one I know a lot of people are excited about, off that Del Mar debutante win. This one on blood should be able to go long. We're not going to know until the day. How serious of a contender do you see her as?
Yeah, I mean, she did beat Explora, who could go favorite in this race when she won that Del Mar debutante in a bit of an upset at the end of the Del Mar meet. I mean, it's interesting. Bob Baffert had the winner of the Del Mar Futurity for the males and the Del Mar debutante for the fillies, and he decided to skip the final 2-turn prep race with both of them, Brandt on the male side, and now with the females, Bottle of Rouge, the same thing. I think Bottle of Rouge just gives you a little more confidence that she's going to want the 2 turns when you watch her run. So it does make a little more sense with this horse that Bob Baffert wouldn't need to find out if she can go longer, because everything about the way she runs and her pedigree says that longer distances are supposed to be right up her alley. But she still has to do it, and she still has to break an 80 Beyer speed figure, which her major rivals have already done in this race. So she's going to have to get faster. But if she's the 3rd or 4th choice in this race, I can get a little bit interested in her.
More questions than answers, and the price will determine. Talked about Percy's Bar before and that win in the Alcibiades. What about the chances of her confirming that form, and at least form in terms of who passed the post first, and continuing to go on in a forward trajectory? Do you like her chances?
Yeah, I mean, disappointing for the Connections. They couldn't get that grade 1 victory. The stewards took it away from them, because I know it was a big deal for Connections like that to win a grade 1 race with this horse. But she ran well in the Alcibiades. Obviously, Tommy Joe maybe not running as well as you would have expected made her look a little bit more impressive than she otherwise would have. And the bumping incident obviously gave her an advantage. But she did improve going longer. She ran a faster number. Based on pedigree, I wouldn't necessarily have expected her to get better with added distance, but it seemed like the front running style that she used last time really worked for her. I'm not sure if that same trip is going to be available for her in this Breeders' Cup Juvenile Filly, so that's a bit of a concern for me. But she's a horse that trained really strongly into her last race, and she sometimes tells you how she's going to do in her morning training. So she's the kind of horse that I'd really want to follow morning workouts and the clock report to see how she's doing ahead of this Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies.
Well, that's the perfect segue to the next thing I wanted to ask you about in terms of your Breeders' Cup analysis. You're part of the DRF Breeders' Cup package, where there's going to be PPs, there's going to be analysis, there's going to be projected odds, and there's going to be that clocker report to get that and your thoughts as the race develops. We encourage folks to go to drf.com and check that out. An indispensable part of my handicapping when it comes to the Breeders' Cup for sure. And hey, if you want even more out there, folks, you can check out some of the stuff that we have on the In the Money Plus side for Breeders' Cup that aren't anywhere else. Figure equivalencies for foreign horses, trip notes, things like that. You can check that out in themoneypodcast.com/plus. But from this far out, and we were talking about this way early, before the pre-entries even, we talked about this as a race that could throw up a long shot. Is there one in particular or a horse of interest that, not asking you for a tip, but somebody you're really curious to see how they run outside of those top contenders that we've already discussed?
I mean, similar to the conversation we had about the Juvenile, we're kind of waiting to see who's actually going to run in this race among those that could be in the 10 to 15 to 20 to 1 range. I'm intrigued to see if any of the horses from the Frizette actually do go out west. Seems like the Frizette winner, Iron Orchard, who's trained by Danny Garkin, he's on the fence. And I think last reporting from, I think it was Dave Grenning, he's leaning against going out there, but we'll see if he changes his tune about that. If she goes, I would be intrigued by the Frizette runner-up, Riley Tolley, who seemed like she really improved going longer for Safi Joseph. I like the way that she finished that race, and she seems like the kind of horse that probably wouldn't attract that much support in this race, and I think at a distance is really proving to work for her. So I'd be intrigued by her getting out around 2 turns for the first time.
David, always a pleasure, my friend. We'll check you out over at drf.com and part of that Breeders' Cup Advance package from DRF, and we'll talk soon.
Yep, sounds good, Pete.
Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf Monster Podcast presented by Spendthrift Farm, home of 6-time reigning champion sire Into Mischief. Callum, I feel like this is 3 years in a row now that we've had you do this race, and you've done it so well, we had to have you back again.
I am so sorry to all your listeners and viewers who have had to suffer through 3 consecutive years of me trying to dissect the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf. I'm pretty sure I remember my first year we went European, that went well. Second year we kind of buried in European, that went terribly. And last year we kind of got a little bit of our justification back. But it's been good fun, and I'm looking forward to doing it all over again.
Well, I think the first question is, at least for me, as someone who absolutely fell in love with Lake Victoria prior to her race, is Precise as good or better?
She's not as good. I mean, Lake Victoria is a monster. She was a monster going into this, and she was a monster coming out of this. I think Precise is a very different sort of horse, has been campaigned it very differently. Didn't win her maiden, and then sort of has built on from there. When she won over in Ireland in the matron, she wasn't fancied on that day, composing. Her stablemate was fancied. Beautify, who faces her in this race coming up in America, was also fancied, and she went and beat both of them. And coming out of that race, most people's impression was that she's good. She might not be special. Then she went to Newmarket and put up an incredibly impressive display off a rocket fast pace as well. A very truly run race. I think they were 0.33 off the track record. Fastest time that race has ever been won in the Fillies Mile since it's moved from Ascot. Really, really good time all the way through, and a visually very good performance. And that was her stepping up to the mile for the very first time. So I'm hoping that she can continue that for me today. Unfortunately, as a fan of European runners, she is really the best of a pretty below average bunch of Europeans in this race this year. I do think a lot of them are afraid of Precise. Is she a Lake Victoria? No. Could she be good enough to win this race? She very well might be.
Talk a little bit about some of the other ones. You mentioned Beautify. You don't see if a European wins. It sounds like you believe it's going to be Precise, and if it's not her, it's not going to be the others.
Yeah, Beautify dropped back to 6 furlongs last time after failing to get home over 7 furlongs when behind Precise in Ireland, and she ran no race. Stopped as if something was amiss. Look, if she can come back to the same level she showed in Ireland, you'd be a little more interested, but she's stepping up to the mile again. Now, I know the Breeders' Cup mile is not the same as a European mile. It's flat, it's tight, but still, you'd like to know a horse that can get home. The way these races tend to be run, if they go off at a rocket fast pace and all fall into a heap at the end. And we've seen that in the last few runnings of this race in particular, apart from when Lake Victoria just grabbed it from the scruff of the neck as she turned in and blew them away. I don't see a horse like Beautify being able to reel those horses back in if they fall into her lap.
Justify comes roaring home. He's just immortal. Justify is the 13th Triple Crown winner.
An Arabian Lion claws to the front here. Arabian Lion to win the Grade 1, Woody Stevens. One minute, 21 and 3/5 seconds.
So from your computer screen or your television screen, what do you think about our runners? How do we stack up this year?
I think they're interesting this year. I think that Miss Grillo has been a great source of winners for this race, and ground support, who's got very little experience, did that well. She's a very professional individual. She sort of just gets the job done from the front. She won the Miss Grillo. There was a bit of bumper cars in behind them, and she did get a true run into that race, but I thought that was a very nice performance. So she comes here having won the prep that a lot of previous winners have come out and won. She's certainly got a lot of room to grow. I think Time to Dream is probably the most overbet horse of the entire meeting. I cannot understand why she's a short. She's 7-1 second favourite in the UK at the moment, which for me makes absolutely no sense when she was well behind Imagination the Lady, who's 16-1 in the UK, almost double the price, who I thought ran a very similar race. They were both similarly positioned all the way around last time out. And I think was it the Jessamine? I can never remember what you guys name your races nowadays, but it was interesting to see that Imagination the Lady got a very nice trail into the race, and you could see after missing the kick, Time to Dream was tracking her. Imagination the Lady has gone, and Time to Dream hasn't gone with her. Yes, she's picked up, but she's passing horses falling back in front of her. So I wasn't totally blown away with that. I thought Imagination the Lady was certainly an interesting player at that middle of the price, sort of middle of the field sort of bet, and I think she could run well into the places. She's got that style where she's not going to be bang up front all the way through. She's going to pick them up late, and hopefully she'll run a nice race as well. Some of the others representing the states. I love Brave Deb. If there was one I could take home, it would be Brave Deb. She's absolutely smashing, big, gorgeous individual. She's done everything from the front so far. She won the Surfer Girl, which is a shocking trial for this race, and she did that from the front. If she tries to do the same thing at Del Mar, it won't work. But I think she's a lovely horse, and she could be one when they turn 3. You want to be on the right side of. And Final Accord, tested in Grade 3 company last time, one with plenty in hand. Another one who I think could run into a place 20-1 for the Mark Case team in the UK prices wise. And I'd be interested to see Final Accord as well. I think Imagination, the lady from Final Accord, could run really big races at bigger prices just because their running style would suit how this Breeders' Cup Fillies Juvenile turf is going to look.
Let's go a little bit further east, if you don't mind, before we get out of here. Talk a little bit about Switch and Love. You're closer to Japan than we are.
Only just. I mean, we'll cling on, but I mean, she's really interesting. Won her debut in good style, not at a big old race meeting. She won a debutant's race on that occasion. She then went and run last time out in a much tougher contest where she bumped into what could potentially be an absolute monster out there. She did well to finish second on that occasion. She comes straight here. She's from the same connections that have the very nice. Oh my goodness, how have I forgotten this horse's name all of a sudden? Oh gosh, what's it called? I've totally forgotten. Who's the horse that finished third in the Breeders' in the Kentucky Derby for the Japanese? In the
Forever Young?
On a Saudi Cup. There you go. Forever Young. What a horse. She's from the same stable as Forever Young. I can't believe that just slipped my mind there. But yes, so she's from the same yard as Forever Young. They'll have prepped her for this. This was a target that they made nice and early. She's only had the 2 starts, but we know the Japanese can be so dangerous in these competitions. I do think she bumped into a freak of nature last time out, and I think she might have things a little bit easier here. She's got good gate speed. She's a lovely traveller, and she does quicken for pressure. I think she could be an interesting contender for the Japanese, the only Japanese runner in this race.
I won't hold your feet fully to the fire, Colin, but I will ask you in Ryder Cup fashion. We'll let you take the Japan runner as well. This side of the Atlantic or your side of the Atlantic to win the Juvenile Fillies turf?
I think it'll be our side of the Atlantic. I really do. I think Precise is a very interesting, exciting filly, even if she's not the level of Lake Victoria. I think she's going to really relish this mile, and she's got a lovely attitude. Heads a little bit up in the sky, but she gets it. She gets the job done. She's got plenty of experience. It's interesting the way Aidan O'Brien's campaigning these horses for this race. Now, I mean, Chad Brown's had this race in his back pocket for a long time, and Aidan's certainly trying to steal it away from him. And you feel that they're sending fillies who know what the job is and won't get blown up by the whole pageantry of the event. The Freakstar Friday is always quality, and it's always a big day, and some horses can blow up. I don't think she will. I hope they go off like the clappers with the likes of Brave Deb, Ground Support, all those type of horses trying to set a really strong pace, and she gets a nice trail into the race. And like Lake Victoria, she can go on and hit the line hard and cross the line in front.
This is the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Monster Podcast presented by Spendthrift Farm, home of Maximus Mischief, sire of 2 Grade 1 winners in 2025, including Intrepido. Peter Thomas Fornatal back with you in the Money Media. Monster Pods brought to you by our friends at Spendthrift Farm. And it's very appropriate that they are sponsoring this video about the Breeders' Cup Juvenile because they've got the one at the top of the market, and we're going to talk about him and the other leading contenders. So happy to have back on the In the Money airwaves our friend from Daily Racing Farm, David Aragona. David, how are things?
Doing pretty good. Busy couple of weeks ahead of the Breeders' Cup, but a lot of racing to look forward to at the end of this month.
One of the things I know you're busy with is the DRF special guide preview to the BC that you are a huge part of, writing analyses, coming up with odds lines. I would imagine you're pretty deep in that work as we're talking already, but it's always a great thing for horse players and something I encourage them all to check out.
Yeah, trying to follow the updates day by day as they come in from our team of reporters who are covering each of these divisions. So updating the lines as we get closer to race day, but obviously looking forward to when those pre-entries come out as part of those DRF packages. You'll have access to the pre-entry PPs as of that Wednesday night. So you can get a head start on your handicapping before the Breeders' Cup. And obviously once Breeders' Cup weeks roll around, make sure to check out those packages because you can get the clock report in that VIP package. And that clock report is a really invaluable resource for handicapping those Breeders' Cup cards.
So important, I think, especially you could argue with these juveniles, since we have so little form to go on, how they're doing in those mornings leading up to the big races. Let's talk about the juvenile on Friday, and we'll start with Ted Nafi. He's been so impressive. We've talked about him before on these airwaves. I'm curious what you're thinking about his prospects for this, his biggest test.
I mean, as of where things stand right now, I mean, he kind of looks like the heaviest favorite of all 14 Breeders' Cup races across the 2 days. With the way that this race is coming up, I mean, he passed the 2-turn test in the Breeders' Futurity, something that his main rival, who we'll talk about, hasn't yet proven he can do. And the way that he's finished off his last couple of stakes victories, obviously the hopeful, where he just sprinted across the wire. I think he ran his final furlong in 12.18 seconds or something crazy like that in the hopeful. And then he showed that similar finishing ability last time in the Breeders' Futurity, where it felt like some of the horses in behind him stepped up with better performances, like that highly regarded Ken McPeak trainee Blackout Time, but Ted Noffey was just better than him. So it does feel like he is squarely the one to beat, but he will have to ship out west in a race where most of his main rivals are based on the West Coast.
It's not like it's going to be a slam dunk in that regard, but it is interesting. I'm looking at the international odds right now. The Sharpest book does have Ted Noffey odds on. In part, I'm sure that's because of the news of Napoleon Solo not going to be competing. When you refer to his main market rival, I assume you're talking about Brandt?
It would feel like it's going to be Brandt with Napoleon Solo skipping the race. Brandt is the other one that's coming in with some big speed figures, with plenty of upside. We've only seen him on the racetrack a couple of times. I mean, obviously, there were expectations around him right from the start with that $3 million purchase price and the 101 buyer on debut. I was left a little bit underwhelmed by his victory in the Del Mar Futurity. It was a little more workmanlike than that dazzling debut performance. It is interesting, though, that Bob Baffert elected to skip the American Pharoah with this horse and sort of get that answer as to whether he could go the 2 turns. Maybe it's a sign of confidence, though. Remember, Bob has done this in the past couple of years with the Del Mar Futurity winners. Gaming, who did run a good second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile off a bit of a layoff, and also Prince of Monaco a couple of years ago. Things didn't work out quite as well for him in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So intriguing that Bob Baffert has chosen to train this one into the Breeders' Cup, but he's shown a lot of talent so far.
A dynasty in motion, reshaping the sport's greatest tradition, channeling the legends of his line and surpassing them. 4 of the last 6 Derby winners carry his genes. A Golden Son, a Horse of the Year. Another chapter written beneath those iconic spires. Derby dreams fulfilled for the titans of our industry. From authentic to sovereignty, a legacy both real and supreme. Into mischief.
Those are the big 2. What other names are you looking at who you think could have a say in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile?
Yeah, I guess the other notable runners are those coming out of the local prep race at Santa Anita. The American Pharoah was sort of a 3-horse photo finish in that race, with Intrepido just getting up to win by about a half length at the end. That's a nice horse. I mean, he did upset the Baffert quartet in that race, getting the job done, coming off a maiden victory. So he definitely feels like a horse that's appreciated, getting out around the 2 turns. The favorite in that race, who finished second, Desert Gate, I thought he was a little disappointing because he did run a sneaky good second behind Brandt in the Del Mar Futurity. Didn't feel like he really stepped forward, but maybe second time going around 2 turns, he can move ahead in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Plutarch is the one that intrigues me a little bit coming out of that race, the maiden for Bob Baffert. If he does indeed run back in the Juvenile as a maiden, he didn't get the most comfortable trip in the American Pharoah. He looks like a slightly tricky horse to ride, but there's talent there. So I'll be interested to see if there's any pace in this race for a horse like that to close into.
That's an interesting idea. I mean, looking at the betting right now, it doesn't, either horses are going to come out of the woodwork or we're not going to have necessarily a full gate. What is your understanding from what you're hearing from the team?
Yeah, in addition to Ted Noffey maybe being the biggest favorite of the 2 days, this might be the smallest field because it seems like a lot of the contenders from New York are not going to ship out there. I know Ken McPeak has a couple of possible prospects, Blackout Time, who was second in the Breeders' Futurity, Universe, who was third in the Champagne. It sounds like both of those are on the fence. I think talking for Danny Gargan, who was coming out of the Champagne, also on the fence. So some things to be ironed out as to who's actually going out to Southern California for this race, but definitely feels like those top 2, regardless of who comes, will be the top 2 choices in the betting.
I wonder if any international connections are getting ideas. I mean, we saw last year a big run from a foreign-based juvenile in the race, seeing maybe not the fullest of fields, maybe the opportunity to prove the value on dirt. Have you heard any whispers about anybody potentially making a move from overseas to try a test like this?
No, I've really heard nothing. I mean, maybe we'll see if one of the European contenders for a race like the Juvenile Turf doesn't get in that race. They'll decide, well, I can get into the Juvenile. Let's just experiment with dirt. But no, I've heard nothing like that. It doesn't seem like Japan is sending over as many 2-year-olds this year. There's only one being talked about for any of the Juvenile races. I think that's a possible runner of the Juvenile Fillies Turf. So probably not. And it's likely to be a small field in this Juvenile.
Great stuff, David. Fantastic to hear from you. We usually have one guest per show on these, but when we had the opportunity to double dip with you, we couldn't resist. So we'll have you on another video folks can click over to, talking about the Juvenile Fillies. And for updated information about everything going on, we're going to have you covered on the podcast side, in the Money Media YouTube channel, to which we encourage you to subscribe. But you should also be checking out drf.com every day and make sure you get the DRF Breeders' Cup package. David, thanks again.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Hello and welcome to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Monster Podcast, presented by Spendthrift Farm, home of 6-time reigning champion sire Into Mischief. The Breeders' Cup Monster Pods continue with our discussion of the Juvenile Turf PTF. Back with you in the Brooklyn Bunker, joined by a man who brings a fantastic perspective to proceedings, because not only does he analyze these races, not only does he ride, does he bet on these races, he's ridden in these races and knows some of these horses. Maybe not these horses specifically, but he knows what it's like to be in the saddle. It's always a perspective I love hearing. Will, how are things? How much are you looking forward to this Juvenile Turf?
Massively looking forward to the Juvenile Turf, Pete. Thanks. I mean, quite the weekend of racing that we've got in store. Really looks to be a Breeders' Cup for the ages, and I'm just looking forward to the whole weekend. It's obviously a busy time for all of us here in the Money Media, but we continue pumping out some great content, and this short video is no exception.
We are thrilled to have you as part of our Breeders' Cup package via In the Money Media, working on trip notes and a variety of other ways your work is going to be featured. Folks should make sure to check that out, inthemoneypodcast.com/plus. Any conversation of this race, I think, has to start with Gstaad, this horse who I was so impressed by at Ascot winning the Coventry. I suppose you could say been disappointing since, in the fact that the horse has been favored 3 times without winning, but these have been big races and pretty good efforts. He's going to come here with a figure and form advantage that's going to make him a short-priced favorite. Does he deserve that place in the market? Could you see rowing in with him at a short price?
I think he definitely deserves his place in the market. He has been beaten at short prices the last 3 times, but he hasn't really lost a lot in defeat. If you look at the numbers, the Racing Post ratings and the official rating that he has, 118, he's officially raced in Britain. That's far superior to anything, any of O'Brien's recent winners at this race. And we should mention that between Charlie Appleby and Aidan O'Brien, they've won 7 of the last 10 renewals at this race. So you naturally look to him as the favourite. And as I say, on figures, he towers over Aidan O'Brien's previous winners. Definitely a live contender, but as you say, been beaten at short prices the last 3 times. While I tremendously respect this horse, last time out, he was extremely buzzy. He was very strong on the way to post. He was rank early on in the race. And Aidan O'Brien says that he's a very big horse. I've never seen him in the flesh, obviously. But I just wonder whether he's going to be suited by the tight turns. And if he's a very buzzy horse, you start to wonder whether he's going to handle the ship over and the travel and the environment and the build-up. And I don't know, at 5-4, he is currently in overseas markets. And that's a little skinny for me. I've got some question marks about it.
Let's get through some of these others. Actually, we'll use a form tie-in because I want to bring in one of the U.S. chances, though a U.S. runner who raced in France earlier this year. The horse I'm talking about is Outfielder. This was supposed to be Ward's best 2-year-old. Lots of chatter about this one in the run-up to Ascot. Did not compete there. Stayed over. Ran with some credit in the morning. Then came back and they were talking about the futurity at Aqueduct. They didn't do that. They went on the dirt at Keeneland instead. Won well enough there, and the post-race chatter, and this is sort of backed up by what we've seen in the pre-entries, the post-race chatter was that Ward was interested in how this horse was gonna stretch out in distance. Made me think a little bit, going way back to his charge, Hootenanny, who stretched out for the first time in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf and was able to be seen to very good effect there. He's a really interesting runner. I think they will go here, is cross-centered in the sprint, but I was curious to get your thoughts on the chances of Outfielder.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the Deauville form line literally, he's got some work to do. He finished 2 lengths behind Stard in that race, and he led for a long way in that race and just tired late over 6 furlongs. And you just wonder, they're going to go a strong pace in this Breeders' Cup race. He's never stretched out this far on the turf before. And the other question mark I have about this horse is that following his recent run on the dirt, Wesley Ward was quoted as saying that he ran this horse on the dirt because he's always believed that he's better on the dirt. And so I'm sort of getting mixed feelings about the fact that they're now shipping back to the turf. Maybe they don't quite know what this horse wants at the moment. And I just, this is a big task for a horse who's never been round 2 turns on the turf before. And I think he's going to set it up for some of the Euros personally.
Let's talk about the Appleby runner that has been entered. Interestingly, you had mentioned this to me, wasn't in the betting ahead of time, but so maybe a little bit of a surprise pre-entry for Wild Desert. We'll take a look at some tape here of Wild Desert with a very troubled trip up in the summer at Woodbine. I couldn't decide about this horse. I couldn't decide if he maybe got the wrong kind of ride at Woodbine, and that led to the trickiness of the trip, or if he's just a horse who's not suited to American racing. The fact that he's entered back at Del Mar, another tight 2-turn oval, certainly suggests that Appleby and team, who know way more than me, think he's going to be just fine with this type of configuration. And maybe it was the wrong kind of ride that day. Where do you stand with Wild Desert?
Yeah, to me, Pete, he's a horse that my mind's going to be completely made up on him, subject to his price. If he gets hammered because he's a Charlie Appleby horse, I probably don't want any part of him. But if he's going to be, sort of in the 5-1 range, I can definitely see, using him in some way, shape, or form, because he's clearly very talented, getting better with every start. And as you say, terrible trip last time. He broke from the 9-hole. He was carried 6 wide on the first turn, and he was wider again on the second turn. The ground he made up in the lane to just be beaten in that race was very impressive. The 81 buyer, that fits in nicely with what you would expect of a live contender for the juvenile turf. And the experience around a tight Woodbine track, that's got to, be to his advantage. The concern I have with him is that he dwelt at the start of that race in Woodbine, and I just fear that he's going to suffer the same fate again, having to work a very wide trip to get clear running room in this big field. I think he's probably talented enough to win, and I respect him immensely. But as I say, the decision I make on him will probably come down to his price.
Justify comes roaring home. He's just immortal. Justify is the 13th Triple Crown winner.
An Arabian Lion claws to the front here. Arabian Lion to win the Grade 1 Woody Stevens. One minute, 21 and 3/5 seconds.
And we'll also have the advantage of being able to get eyes on him week of. One of the things we'll be doing in the content that we provide out there from Del Mar. Make sure you subscribe to the In the Money Media YouTube channel so you don't miss any of that. Also, the In the Money Players podcast, a great place to subscribe. And we have a free newsletter. There might be some written content as well. inthemoneypodcast.com/email. Next on my list of horses to ask you about is Humidity. This is the horse that won the Chesham at Ascot and then ran pretty well at group level the last 2 tries. Thought the horse had a pretty good trip in the Royal Lodge. I was wondering, you disabused me of this off air a little bit, but I was thinking the way the horse drifted left-handed late on might mean left-handed bends will be a good thing. Hard for me to rate this one over Gustad, but it all comes down to price, as you've said, and this one's going to be a big multiple of that one's price, and they don't all take to American racing. Looked like a contender to me. What do you think about Humidity?
I think he's an extremely interesting Euro contender in here. As you say, winner at Royal Ascot earlier this year, and I thought that was a tremendous effort he put up in the Royal Lodge last time. The winner of that race, Bo Echo, is going to be a leading fancy for next year's 2,000 guineas. Looks very, very talented, and he gave him everything he could handle that day. And I actually thought it was an upgradable effort in defeat because he took the early lead and set a really scorching pace early on. And for him to hold on for second late, I thought was incredibly impressive. And I think that this horse shows a lot of credentials that should stand him in good stead at Del Mar. He loves firm turf. He's got excellent gate speed. He's a really strong traveler. He's got a nice turn of foot. And for me, currently looking at the overseas prices, 8-1 about him is far more appealing than the 5-4 about Gustard.
Another leading domestic contender is Botas for Miguel Clement. Be very emotional and awesome to see him in the winner's circle out there at Del Mar with all the family's been through this year. I thought the Pilgrim Stakes effort was really good. It felt like that was an even pace, did well to close into it. The final figure of 80, that's going to leave you behind what you're going to expect these best Euros are going to run, but showed some good late pace. I think it's upgradable. I like that term. I like the way you phrase that when talking about humidity. I'll use it for Botas as well. This is a horse at the current prices. You know, you're seeing what, 8-10 to 1. That would want to make me consider getting this one in the mix. Is this the most likely of the domestics in your view?
I think he is, Pete. That was only a second start in the Pilgrim last time, and we shouldn't forget the fact that here's Johnny laid all over him in the stretch. I mean, he had a really troubled stretch run that day. I thought for a second out 2-year-old, he showed incredible guts and determination to fend off that rival and continue running hard to the wire. I think with a cleaner trip, he's only going to improve as he makes his third start. And although the 80 buyer maybe does leave him a little bit short, we shouldn't forget that Ironman Cal actually ran second in this race last year, having run just a 79 buyer in the Zuma Beach the time prior. So, the 80 bar that he posted and is probably going to improve upon certainly isn't out of line with this group. And to me, he looks very talented. I think he's got a huge shot.
2 more questions for you. Quick ones. Anything at a wild price, ones that we haven't talked about that you might want to give a quick shout to on the video, or do you think we've covered who you see as the main contenders?
I think we've covered the main contenders. I should maybe just give a quick mention to Turf Star and Proton, the 2 pre-entered horses going out for the motion barn. Both talented individuals. Turf Star, he had a slightly troubled trip behind final score in Bourbon last time when finishing second. But the 74 buyer probably does leave him a little short. I think he's going to have his work cut out. Proton, he's going to need a couple of horses to come out of this race if he's to get in. Another talented horse, one that I ride every day. Good winner of the Laurel Futurity last time, but again, this is a tough test for him.
I should have mentioned in the intro that you work for the motion team, and I was right the first time. You have ridden some of these, so I didn't need to edit myself there. Last question, most important question. I know it's early, but I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. Who wins the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, and do you have any thought on how you might play it from a wagering point of view?
Look, at the moment, I think the 8-1 about humidity is extremely tempting. I think that he's a very talented individual, and as I previously mentioned, shows a lot of qualities that should see him to really good effect around Del Mar. Probably not going to take nearly as much money as either the O'Brien or the Appleby horses. And for me, at this point in time, he would be the horse I'd be keying in on in this race. From a wagering standpoint, now that really is holding my feet to the fire, Pete. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to play this race yet without looking at prices and draws and what have you. But Bottas is certainly going to be of high interest to me, and I do think that Wild Desert, if he can work out a trick, is going to be certainly very interesting in here too.
Great stuff, Will. We look forward to talking to you again very soon, and have a fantastic time out at the Breeders' Cup.
Thanks, Pete.